What's up? I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast,
where we interview successful businessmen and women to let you in on why success doesn't have a single formula to follow.
We also have a little bourbon tasting along the way, because why not? Why not?
So guys, please enjoy this episode and let us know your thoughts at Bourbon and Business Podcast on Instagram.
Coming to you from the Bourbon and Business Studio here at the AC Hotel in Ridgeland, Mississippi. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast. How you doing this afternoon, Dakota?
A lot better than you, Tyler. How are you?
To say the least. I'm doing great considering. So glad to be here. Well, you want to introduce our guest to us?
I do. Today we have special guest, Thom Neiheisel. He is the Director of Bulk Whiskey Sales and Contract Distillation at Pernod Ricard. Thom, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. I love the whiskey barrel in your background there of your
That's the
camera.
best one
That's
I could
awesome.
find. I have a few other ones, but that's the more popular one.
Look, it looks good to me. So, Tyler, we're sipping on some Brothers Bond here because I felt like you and I were kind of like brothers.
Well, it's a cool bottle.
We've been mistaken for twins before.
Yeah, I don't know about who, but maybe so. But
that was a dream. Never mind.
Great, cool bottle. Looks cool. I really like the taste of this one too, Dakota. I think you're going to like it. It's got a really good burn. Proof-wise, I have not seen the proof, but I actually just saw it glancing at the back of the bottle, so I'm not going to lie, it's a 95 proof. But for 95 proof, it has a stout burn to it.
That's hot for a 95.
So I like that. I'm going to have to come in at a 9.0.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
that's a strong rating there.
What did that bottle cost?
About $50.
So about for $50, that's a really good bottle. And if you want a bottle of this, go to Cheers Vineyard in Gluckstadt, Mississippi, and they can hook you up with a bottle. Or if you don't like bourbon, they got pretty much anything else in the spirit world there. So
just ask them; they'll get it going for you.
Well, appreciate you coming on today, Thom.
Thank you.
We'd like to start this kind of just give our listeners your background, where you're from, and then how you became the director of the company that you're currently at.
Sure. So I've been in the bourbon industry for, actually this month is 20 years. It was my 20-year anniversary. Started out at Brown-Forman, better known as Jack Daniel's. Started out in their Lynchburg, Tennessee facility, and then moved up to corporate for a bit of time. Then spent about 8 years at Brown-Forman, and then jumped over to Diageo. Accepted a role there, was with Diageo for about the same period of time, about 8 years. And now I've been with Pernod Ricard again this month. It's my 40-year anniversary with Pernod. So I've been in all kinds of roles, from everything from procurement to operations, planning, project management. I was project manager for a couple of distilleries, and bulk sales. I've been in and out of bulk sales. It's kind of like we joke, it's kind of like being in the mafia. You try to get out and they pull you back in. It seems like every company I'm with, eventually I end up somehow involved in bulk sales, in contract distillation. So I've been the director of contract distillation full-time for Pernod since last April, May. So coming up on a year.
Fantastic. Well, what made you want to get into this industry?
I love everything about the industry. Always have. Was a big bourbon and Tennessee whiskey fan long before I got in the industry. I was, again, fortunate enough to land that first role at Brown-Forman, but literally everything about it, the process, the history, the people, the brands, the packaging. I mean, just every single aspect about it, particularly on the operations side. On the distillation side, just became enamored with that. And kind of gravitated towards the operational side on the distilling side. So,
fantastic.
And I love the products.
That's a big
absolutely.
Win. That's a big.
It started with
deal.
a love of the products. So
Tyler's love was around 5 years old? Is that when you first had Jack?
No, I was much older than that.
I think that's about right. What would you say to our listeners who don't necessarily know the process of how bourbon is made? Could you give us like a quick, just a 15,000 foot view of that?
Sure. I mean, there's federal regulations, right, for it to be bourbon, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it has to be 51% corn, right? Can't go in the barrel at 100, at over 125 proof. Has to be in a new charred oak container. There's the usual bits to that, right? You can go to any tour and they'll give you the highlights.
Yes.
But that's the gist of it. There's some distilling nuances in there too, right? Can't go off the still at over 160. Like I said, can't go in the barrel at over 125. Has to be 51% corn. One of the things, one of the big nuances that everybody gets confused is they think all bourbon has to be made in Kentucky. It absolutely does not. It can be made in any of the 50 states. But one would argue some of the best bourbon comes out of Kentucky. May argue that from time to time, but certainly Kentucky is where the majority of it comes from. So, yeah.
And we've heard some rumors, and maybe you can speak light to this since you've been in the bourbon or in the distilling industry for so long. But we hear that there may be a shortage on oak as far as for the barrels and the process. Do you see that becoming a problem at some point, or do you think that's more of a myth than it is actually truth?
There was some truth to that, but it's a bit dated. So going back probably 3, 4, 5 years ago, right as the industry and the world was coming out of COVID, right? Sales were in uncharted territory, right? They were on a vertical incline, and the demand for barrels got very tight. There was, I would say, supply was tight. You'll hear people talk, well, it was a white oak shortage, it was a barrel shortage. It was really a capacity constraint at that particular given period of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
there were some articles out there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's plenty of white oak. Getting to the white oak can sometimes be problematic, but the major cooperages, they are very good at what they do. But yeah, it was more of a capacity at the cooperage constraint for a very specific period of time. But there was I'll call it whatever you want, a bit of a rumor running around that, we couldn't get white oak. I think that was more done for clickbait than anything else.
Yeah. Well,
it was really just a capacity.
A lot.
Yeah, it was really just a capacity constraint thing. So, because it's more sexy to say we're going to run out of white oak than it is, the cooper just can't.
Well, that's what I'm going to title this. Yeah. I'm going to title this video, Kid Tries Jack Daniels.
There you go.
Just for clickbait, because that's what news articles do nowadays anyway.
That's right.
Well,
yep.
And another thing, kind of piggybacking off that, like you said, we saw liquor sales kind of spike after COVID. I think now we're moving more into a normal territory after COVID. Some headlines are saying, hey, now the younger generation are maybe drinking less, so the sales are going down. Do you think it's more of, hey, we're just seeing it more level out from COVID, the spike that we had, or do you think there actually is a decline in alcohol sales?
Yeah, I mean, this gets into some of the retail stuff that I'm, that's a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I'll certainly give you a bit of an opinion. Well, first off, I'm very bullish on the industry. Full stop. Yeah. Again, I've said earlier in our discussion, I love everything about the industry, from the process, the product, the people, the history, the packaging. There's no doubt retail sales, off the shelf are down, right? Mid-single digits. Is that good? Absolutely not, right? Is it the end of the world? Has everyone stopped drinking bourbon, right? Because as you said, if you read the clickbait, right, it's nobody's drinking bourbon anymore. That couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? Frequent bars, right? I assure you, bourbon is still moving off the shelf. It is down, but it's just, again, it's more dramatic, and it's going to get people's attention to say that, everyone stopped drinking. That's absolutely not the case. Yeah. But no, I'm absolutely bullish on it. I think there's a lot of inventory out there. It was made at the height or after COVID, and some of the distilleries pulling back a little bit, right? That has led to everyone going, oh, well, see, nobody's drinking bourbon anymore. That's really not the case. Right. It's just an inventory adjustment is really what it is.
That's the problem with when you have just statistics with no context around them. You can make the numbers say whatever you want them to say. Really,
exactly.
That's a problem with really any industry, especially the
or context with no statistics, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you have one without the other, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of saw this phenomenon too. Whenever
good word
COVID happened, sales spiked. every celebrity in the world, everybody else comes out with a new label. And then so you had all these new labels on the shelf and stuff like that. So I think now you're actually going to see, hey, the cream of the crop kind of rise to the top, hey, because you have all these options now. Okay, what are the best options? What do I actually enjoy drinking? So I think you'll see some of that as well too.
Right. Yep.
So I have a note here, Tom, that you started your career in London. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that was outside the industry. I was not in the industry at the time. But I did early in my career, lived in the UK for a period of time.
Because I don't hear the accent. So
no, it was I was doing project management for a company in procurement. But it was back when expat assignments were lucrative. So it was a great experience for early on in my career. Get out of your comfort zone very quickly. Right. So no, it was a great experience, but unfortunately it wasn't in the bourbon space. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, tell us a little bit. So how did you make the transition over to Pernod Ricard?
I was working at Diageo at the time, and I was the site director for the second Bullet distillery, a Bullet bourbon distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. I was the project manager for the distillery build, and then stayed on to be the site director. Was the site director running the distillery with an amazing team there, and got a few calls from Pernod, and the rest is history, as they say. So I jumped over Pernod shortly thereafter. On a project management role as well, and then eventually it morphed into this bulk sales role.
So the bulk sales role, let's talk about that a little bit. What was it like, kind of like, I guess, working your way up and through the industry, so to speak? Because you've had, a few different roles over the years. Sure. So what's it been like? You said you keep gravitating back to this one, right? It's like a love-hate relationship almost, just kind of the feeling I was getting there. So what is it? What is the big pull to bulk sales? What do you enjoy most?
Definitely love it for sure. It is, the big pull is you get to deal with the outside world, right? A lot. So with bulk, you're dealing with a lot of the craft distilleries. Theoretically, you're dealing with all the craft distilleries, right? Because in the world of bulk sales, at the end of the day, and this is an important point, consumer of the majority of bulk that's sold on the market ends up being bottled by craft distillers, or if you're familiar with the term NDP, non-distiller producer, right? Those are people who have brands, right? But they don't necessarily have a distillery. That's where the majority of that bulk ends up, right? The majority of the bulk sales isn't to the large legacy players, right? Majority of it ends up with the craft distilleries. So one of the fun parts of the role is actually getting to know, the founders of these craft distilleries, and it's nice because they're incredibly passionate, obviously, about what they do. Many of them have their life savings in it, right? They love the brand. They love the process. So getting to interact with the outside world, so to speak, right, outside of Pernod, and dealing with the craft distilleries is really a fun part of it. And seeing all their projects come to life and different brands they're trying to either start or sustain, right, and grow. That's probably overall the best part of it. Plus, dealing with so many different products and people, and there's some real characters too in our industry, which makes it fun as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about long-term barrel planning, because that's a fascinating subject to me, because I know there's, everybody talks about it, especially if you go on a tour of a distillery or something. Everybody's like, the heat rises, so you got to rotate the barrels and stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is that like, actually planning for that long-term situation?
There's definitely a little bit of magic in it. Everybody, when you go on a tour, right, it's interesting in that very few, if any, industries, if you start with the basics, makes a product and then waits, can't do anything with it, right, for 4, 6, 8, 10 years. It's a very interesting business model. And you're going to be wrong. There's no way you're going to be right. It is just who is the least wrong, right, is the one that's going to come out, because there's no way of predicting, right, where the overall market, new product launches, all that is going to impact your inventory. So first you start with the basic, which is I'm planning for something 4, 6, 8, 10 years in advance. That is an estimate, would be an understatement, right, on what you start with. And then you start compounding on the things. Number one, the angel share, right? So you're losing so much every year. You add that into it. You add in, again, like new product launches that someone may want to do that wasn't planned for 4, 6, 8 years ago, right? Competitive pressures, how things turn out in the barrel, depending on where they're at in the warehouse. All those things have to be factored into that. And if you're long on inventory, that's even a slightly different problem to deal with, which is often where bulk sales comes in, right? Because the larger players, if they're long on inventory, they'll have a counterpart to me selling their excess inventory. So,
well, with you having such a long track record in the industry, whenever you go get a bourbon, what are you looking for?
Did you read my note?
No.
I literally have that written down on my paper.
What are you looking for taste-wise whenever you pick a bourbon?
I was going to ask it a little more elegantly, but to Tyler's question,
I have a sweet tooth, right? So admittedly, I start with that. So I tend to gravitate towards anything weeded, right? First off, anything weeded. So if I look at the Pernod portfolio, one of my favorites is we own Rabbit Hole, right? So Rabbit Hole Derringer is a weeded bourbon, but then it's also finished in Oloroso sherry casks, right? So even more sweet added into it. So that's where I gravitate a lot, was anything weeded. I don't get hung up on age, right? Some people are just like, I won't touch anything. I'm under 10 years old. I've tasted stuff that was 5 years old. It was nothing short of amazing. And I've tasted stuff that was 12 years old that tastes like you're chewing on a stave, right? So it really depends. I've had some 23-year-old. It was off the charts good. That's why my go-to is always going to be something weeded or something in a wine or sherry cask finish, right? Is what I go to. Third is going to be an old fashioned, right? Something that mixes well with an old fashioned, because going back to that sweet tooth, that would be where I go with it. Third, and then
man, I love a good old fashioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, and then it's going to be heresy to some purists, but there are days I just go for bourbon and Coke.
Yeah.
So, which, you got to drink what you
Nothing
like.
wrong with that.
No.
Nothing wrong with that, for sure. So, well, what would you tell, maybe there's a young person out there that says, hey, I'm wanting to get into the liquor industry, bourbon industry, which, I mean, there's tons of different ways they could go with it. What advice would you give them?
So I'm coming from the operations side, right? So first and second would be engineering and or finance, right? So we're always going to be making bourbon. So anything on the engineering operation side, we're always going to need somebody to count the money, right? So anything finance, that would be, again, I'm speaking strictly from an operations side, right? Marketing side, obviously marketing degrees on the brand side, but that's where I'm weakest, just because I've always been on the operations side. But watch all the websites, right? All the companies are always hiring for something, right? And obviously ebbs and flows. Yeah, just watch the websites and apply and know the products, right? That's the big thing. It's amazing how many people we interview that have no idea, who the company is, what products, what brands they own, that type of thing, because there's always that connection there, right? So.
Yeah, I just feel like if you want to stand out to somebody, do a little bit of research. I mean, at a minimum nowadays, you can just ask AI, be like, hey, what are the top 3 products that get sold from Pernod, know that going into the interview. It takes you 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and ask the waiter or waitress how something is on the menu, and they're like, oh, I've never tried it. It's
like, great. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
or it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm saying don't buy that. Yeah.
It's always like an expensive restaurant too, and I'm about to drop $50 on a plate, and it's like, I don't know if that's good or not. Am I feeling lucky tonight or not?
Yeah.
So. We'll roll the dice.
Well, tell our listeners a little bit more about, you've been on the sales side for so long. We have a lot of people that are in sales for whatever industry they're in. What advice would you give them in a sales career to be successful?
Again, tough question for me, because I come from most of the operation side, and in bulk sales is really B2B, right? It's always like we are selling to, we sell everything to craft distilleries, to brokers, right? There's a lot of brokers out there who buy barrels, and then there's even investors, right? The investor community. So B2B is a little bit different than business to consumer, B2C. The needs are different. The reaction times are different. We get very technical on our side. On the bulk side, it's very where was it made, when was it made, what was the fill date, what was the entry proof, what was the mash bill, right? Was it finished? What part of the warehouse was it in, right? That type of stuff. So we tend to get into the weeds, and you have to know your stuff, and then the legal piece of it too, right? Because it's a heavily regulated industry.
Yeah.
So it's amazing you still get people who are like, well, I need to come pick that up with my truck. It's like,
yeah,
hang on. There's a whole legal process, transfer and bond. That's right. That's, monitored and regulated by the TTB that has to be followed to move barrels, and sell barrels, things like that. So definitely know the technical and operation side of the business. This side of the business isn't quite as sexy as the retail side, or the bottle side, if you will.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think you touched on an important point there. In sales, obviously there's different levels to whatever industry you're in sales wise. Obviously,
what level are you?
If you're
at the top,
if you're selling just a low ticket item product, you may not have to know as much information about that product.
That's right.
It's probably pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But when you start selling the bigger ticket items, then yes, you're going to have to have a better technical knowledge. You're going to have to understand what you are selling, because the consumer you're dealing with more than likely is going to want to know that information because they're spending more money on it. So
And
I think that is it.
These barrels are big ticket items.
Yeah.
They're big ticket items, and a lot of times you're dealing with, again, craft distilleries or brokers who are therefore dealing with craft distilleries.
Yeah.
And this is their future product. This is their livelihood. This, can make or break them, right? And they take it very, very, very serious, which they should. So there's a whole kind of level of, like I said, operational details and technical details, but also it's a pretty serious game, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think another important point you're touching on too is, if you're in sales, know the operation side of the business.
That's right.
I started my career in sales. I've moved more into the operational side now, but as a salesperson, you're always like, hey, I want to be out there. I want to make the sale. Yeah, we'll give you a discount on this or whatever. Well, then it goes to the operation. They're like, hold up, like, we can't give this discount. Like, how'd you come up with this? And then you get this like fight between the operations and sales, but it's like, hey, operations is making sure we can operate and run the business and have a profit. Sales, you just can't go out there and just promise whatever just to get the sale done.
That's right.
So I think that's especially for sales people, I think it's easy for people that are naturally on the operations side. But if you're naturally a salesperson, you have the tendency to say, hey, I got to get this. I got to try to get this sale, however, and sometimes it doesn't work.
You're getting it done, and you're under pressure. You're under the gun. If you got quota or something you're trying to hit, you're trying to get that sale any way that you can. You're just trying to make it work, and then you get slapped with the operational metaphoric slap there that says, "Absolutely not. Get your hand out the cookie jar."
Yep.
And then you got to try to come back from that.
The good salespeople can do
How good at sales are you? How good are you?
Well, Dakota, I think it's the time for you to give us your thoughts on the
Brothers Bond. We fist bumped for our people who aren't watching. I thought it was really hot for a 95. I think that's the rye in there. It's a 4 grain, but it's rye heavy, and it honestly wasn't my favorite. I think this might be one of the first times we're at like kind of opposite ends here. So you're at a 9.0. I'm going to land at 7.9.
Wow, 7.9.
I didn't even finish it. I didn't like it as much.
We'll end at.
You're still my brother in bond.
We'll go at 8.4 for that.
That sounds
so
good.
We'll end at 8.4 for
Brothers Bond.
Brothers Bond. I almost call it Brothers and Bond. If you want a bottle, go to Cheers Vineyard in Gluckstadt and pick it up. Of course, they've got whatever else you're looking for there. So
they also have an Oath to the Earth.
Well, nice. Well, good deal. Well, Tom, we appreciate you coming on for this episode.
For sure.
Tell our listeners if they are wanting to connect with you or your company, what is the best way they can do that?
Sure. For me, literally LinkedIn. Yep. You'll find me on LinkedIn. We check it every day. We use it quite a bit as a business tool. And then Pernod Ricard is an organization. It's www.pernod-ricard.com. We'll have all the information about all of our wonderful global, regional, and local brands. Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, to our listeners, have you stream this podcast? If you would give us a rating and follow us on social media, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
If you have any feedback or would like to be featured, reach out to us at bourbonandbusinesspodcast@gmail.com.
Or find us on Instagram at Bourbon and Business Podcast.
Thanks again for listening.
Follow us for more content and info on the next episode.